Today we will discuss about what are the interview questions is asked in Spring Boot, microservices and Java 8 related questions. So I given more than 20 of interview with the different company, and I collected this interview questions mostly which they ask related for Java, Spring Boot, microservices and Java 8. So the first questions we will discuss in Spring Boot. First we'll go for the Spring Boot interview questions with SQLs and all, and then we'll go for this microservices, and after that we'll go for this Java 8 features and interview questions which mostly they asked in the different interview I collected. So when I have gone through this different companies for this interview and all, in that time the first questions mostly I seen how we will connect the external database like MS SQL and Oracle in Spring Boot. So this is the very common questions which will be asked in every interview. I seen this is the every interview they ask like how to connect this external database of MSQL and any other oracles or any other SQL like SQL servers and all in Spring Boot. So yeah, it's done in this following step. So how you will connect to the external database in Spring Boot. So this is the first step. So first you have to have a Spring Boot data dependency which you have to add in the pom.xml, then add this dependency in pom.xml. After that you have to create a table schema and then configure the same user ID details and all in your application.property. Then you are ready to restart the service and get connect ready. So this is the 4-5 step which have to taken care while we connect this Spring Boot using any database. Others ask like how you add this custom JS code in Spring Boot. So yeah, we can add the custom JS code also. So how you will add depends on the requirement. We have to add in this resource file static. You have to create a resource folder. Inside that package, inside this static you have to add. So src main resource static /js. So in this directory you can add this any type of JS code like JavaScript code, either alert or any type of validations. If you are putting in this JS related validations or some alert or maybe some date times related date pickers and all, then you can add this in a Spring Boot. So this I seen 2-3 questions, 2-3 interview which they ask this JS, custom JS, how you will add. Others we seen like how you will enable auto reload of application in Spring Boot. Yeah, we can enable. So how you will do, Spring Boot dev tools is there dependency you have to add in pom.xml. So once you will add this Spring Boot dev tools, so that if optional is true, then automatically this will be reload whatever the changes you are doing in your application, that all things will automatically change. No need to build or run this build these applications and all. So this will be automatically taken care by using devs tools. Others questions what I have seen like what is the reason to have a Spring Boot Maven module. So Maven module, why? Because of this reason Maven module gives couple of charges of which employ your package code as a container and run an application. So Spring Boot run is there which will be operate a Spring Boot application. A Spring Boot repackage is there, it is a package, or we can say it's this var to execute, and a Spring Boot a start and a Spring Boot a stop. So which will be used for this life cycle while you are starting this life cycles. Then we have a start and end. So Spring Boot applications will test, and a Spring Boot application build data, create, build data and utilize this actuators. So these all are the run, repackage, start, build the data, start, stop and build the data which we have in Maven module because of this reason. Others question which I seen, but these questions I seen rarely. I asked some of the 1 or 2 interview questions I seen. Others have how to make a Maven a Spring Boot Ventures utilizations Spring Initializer. So this Spring Initializer is a web application can be produced as Spring Boot structures. It doesn't create any application code, however, it gives essential project structures, either Maven, Gradle. A specification based on this requirement, we can add this. So Spring Initialization can utilize a few different way, including online interface via Spring Tool Suite or Spring Boot CLI. So how we will make a Spring Boot ventures utilization in Spring initializers? We can do this through the online also, as Spring Tool Suite also is there, and command line argument also. So these things. Others like this is the also very common in questions which is asked in different interview, how you will enable HTTP2 support in a Spring Boot. Yes, we can enable HTTP2 support in a Spring Boot server.ht2 http dot enable true. And this is the way if you this is the examples which I captures there. This way we can enable, you can enable HTTP support in a Spring Boot as a following enable, and after that you'll create a bin configuration server web factory, and that you can enable. Others we seen like how you will enable HTTP response compression in a Spring Boot. So while compressing this Spring Boot, maybe using gzip will be there, so which is used for the compressing this Spring Boot application. So in this application dot property, you have to mention a Spring server dot compression dot enable equal true. Server compression mean response equal to whatever the size you are putting, 2048 or 4084. And then server compression MIME type, application and JSON type, XML type, HTML type, and this type, so that you can captures this response in compressed form. So this is also asked many of the interview questions. And what is the difference between request mapping and get mapping? So that get mapping and request mapping also will ask many of the interview questions. So get mapping, request mapping annotation is mapping for HTTP get one specific handle, and get mapping composed annotation that act as shortcut, and request mapping and get mapping newer annotations. It's like that. So, and how do you configure error logging and debugging in a Spring Boot? So error logging and debugging we can configure in a Spring Boot property or YAML file. So that property or YAML file you have to debug and error like that. So logging label org, then a Spring Wake framework dot web debug or errors. So what is the use of a Spring Boot application annotation? This is a very common questions which will be asked in every interviewer. At the Spring Boot application annotation introduced in 1.2.0 version, and is a convenience annotations which is used for the Spring Boot enable or addition bin using class path definition. So internally we have a 3 annotations which will be worked inside this Spring Boot application annotation: @configuration, @enable configuration, @component scheme. What is auto configuration in a Spring Boot? So that auto configuration is a way in a Spring Boot to configure a Spring application automatically basis of dependency. What are the present in pom.xml or path? It make a development as a easier, so you don't need to provide anything as a manually, so automatically it will take it. Suppose if you created a custom configuration for my SQL data source in a Spring Boot, so @configurations you have mentioned in the class of MySQL or configuration. So these things automatically will take care all the respective details through the class path by using @auto configuration and configuration annotation. What does a Spring Boot starter POM means and why it is useful? A starter are arranged advantage reliance descriptions that you can incorporate the applications. So the starter considered amount of dependency, but see, Spring Boot starters will have contain all the dependency which is required in pom.xml, so that they will run this, they will manage this and then run. So this starter POM are helpful reliance descriptor can be added to your application. In another word, we can say, like if you are building a project utilization, then a Spring batch is preparing for this, incorporate a Spring Boot starter launch and import all the required conditions. So this is the also I seen less rarely as ask this interview questions of a starter related, but others we have seen this most of the common interview questions they ask. So this type of questions I suffer 5 to 10 companies where I got this, so I collected. Apart from this, we will discuss about this microservices interview question. So that also I kept created or captured in different document, which is related for some company has asked. So we will discuss for this microservices. So in microservices, while if you are working as a Java developer based on this Spring Boot microservices, if you having 6 years, 5 to 7 years or 8 years of experience, so most of the common questions will ask these things related. What is microservice? Why would someone want to look at implementing it? So microservice architecture style is there, which is structures applications collections loosely coupled independently maintainable testables deployment service which organize around of business capability. So why we use microservice, what are the advantage of microservices, and how you will create them. So microservices, which is we are decomposing or decoupling from this many services, one services of monolithic to different microservices. So we can easily develop the application, easily deploy the application, easily modified monitor the applications. So we have multiple advantage, disadvantage are there. You can go through this. Others is when should one consider microservice kind of architecture. So there are two cases when you will consider either microservice architectures we can go or maybe some other architectures. So there are two ways. If we have monolithics and it grows and extend where problem scaling, reutilizations, modules error across the platforms and all is coming, then you want to scale this multiple changes if you want to modify this and all, then in that cases you can go for this. You can think the business cases, implement easily and multiple testable scalable features, might be across others project, have a product platform at same time. So in that cases you can go for the microservices, depends on this capability. Like if you have all monolithic applications and you are getting some of the issues related for utilizations, component, module and service deployment related issues, then you can go for that. Otherwise independent development, so that parallelly not yet started, now you are thinking to start a business, so you can decide the what are the features are there in microservice monolithics and all. Based on that, whatever your requirement, if you want independent deployment, testing, monitoring, scaling and all those things, then you can go for the microservices architecture. Why would you test microservice based architecture? How would you test? While we need to test, so we have a unit test or integration test. So there are multiple testing environment will be there to test the application by the testers, but we have in developer side we have a integration test and unit test which is used for the microservice testing. So one should have a component based testing, and component based testing we have to test, and one should have a contract based testing to assess the expectations of the client, not breaking end-to-end testings of microservices. However, only test as a critical flow, time consuming, then two side of consumer contract testings will be there. Other we have seen what is service discovery, how it is useful. So service discovery, why service discovery? So this is the part of service discovery is used for this Spring Cloud component, where why is required. Suppose in environment where Docker's image is dynamically deployed in any machine or IP port combination, it is difficult to independent the service to update at runtime. So service discovery is created due to that purpose only. So service discovery is the one of the service running under the microservice architecture, which registered entire of all the services running under the service mesh. So all these actions are visible or available through this REST API. So whenever the service is up and running, this individual services register themselves to the service discovery. Service registry and service discovery maintain heartbeat to make sure all those are alive. That also serve a purpose of monitoring servicing as well. Service discovery is also helpful for distributing requests across this service of deployed in a fair manner, like this. So you can also see this, what is the service discovery, how will be useful. And after that we see like what is a client side and server side service discovery. So service discovery also will have a two types. One is the client side, another is server side. So instead of client side directly connected to the load balancer, so this architecture patterns of the client connectors to the service registry and try to fetch the data or service from it. And server side is a proxy layer, which is or API gateway layer, try to connect this service registry that make all the appropriate service afterward. So these two way we can have a service discovery, either client side and server side. Then other we shall explain how can you scale your microservice based system. So how you will scale. So there are have a one can scale the system by increasing number of instance. If you will increase the multiple instance for this particular services, then you can scale. Other one can be apply the cache as a microservice layer. Cache is also a part of easy to manage this invalidation of the caches can be done very easily to the microservice will be single source of truth. And one can be have also shut down some container when requirement is less, so that scale is down. So these are the way like you can increase the number of instance, you can add this cache, apply the cache in microservices like that, and enable the API gateways and all. Then you can have a scale your microservices. Define microservices architecture. So what is microservices? Why microservice came? Before that SOA was there. What is SOA? Before that monolithic was there. So how monolithic to SOA, then to SOA to microservices came. So what is the use of microservices? What is the microservices architecture? So microservices just a small component for this is a loosely coupler, and microservice architecture's neutral is applying single responsibility principle at this architecture's level. Like we are dividing from this monolithic as a big application to the different a small component is called a microservices, so that independently we can deploy it, monitor, tracking, and develop the application. Difference between microservice and SOA. So what is microservices, why it required, what is SOA? So this is the difference. So through that we get some of the questions also ask like what is microservice, what is SOA, and others we seen like some of the interview questions ask what is bounded context. Bounded context is a domain driven, is a central pattern in domain driven. Bounded context, everything related for the domain are visible within the context internally. And after that characteristics of microservices: high cohesion, loose coupling, bounded context is there, already we discussed here. And then a fault tolerance will be there, decentralized data management will be there, versioning for backward capability, continuous delivery, continuously automate, CI/CD will be configured here, secure is there. So like that event driven is there as a synchronous communications update or synchronous. And what are the benefit of microservice architectures? What are the benefit of using microservice architecture? So there are multiple benefits are there: autonomous deployment, cultural shift, technology driven, and DevOps cultures. So these all are the things are there where microservices is very benefit using microservice architecture if you are following. This is the also very most important questions like what is polyglot persistence? Can this idea be used for in monolithic application as well? So polyglot persistence is all about the different database of different business need within a single distributed system. We already have different database product and make each of the specific business needed. So that is called polyglot persistence. So RDBMS, suppose if you want RDBMS, MongoDB, Cassandra, Amazon DynamoDB and all, and Redis caches and all, Neo4j, so Graph DBL. So these all are, so benefit of polyglot, like manifold and can be harvested for both monolithic as well as microservices architecture. So we can use anywhere, like in monolithic applications also we can use for this polyglot persistence, and DBMS also we can use, microservice also we can use. So if you have a multiple deployment or database is there, you need to use, depends on the requirement, then we can go for this polyglot persistence, so that as per this requirement you can use them. And then what are the challenges in microservices? So challenges, what type of challenges in microservices? We have a multiple advantage and disadvantage in there and all the services. So these all are the following content is the challenges while we are developing microservices: how we will configure, how we will deploy it, how to disconnect the microservice, what are the isolation, discovery, logs we can track, what are the complexity, like this. DevOps, how you will configure DevOps things, start, stop, auto deployment, CI/CD and all. So these all are the challenges which we have, some of the advantage, some of the disadvantage. Why microservice is better than monolithic? We already discussed, many things are there in this. Whenever you want to add, update, modify it, you can do. What are the testings you want, you can do. If you are doing any deployment, easily you can do for this. If you want to stop the services, instead of this monolithic microservice, easily we can stop the services and all. So this is the examples we use. And how to convert this large application into the microservice. Suppose we have a large application which is already there and deployed in monolithic application. Now you want to convert into microservices, or how you will convert it from this big application to the monolithic microservice application. So suppose we have a microservice related product inventory, product reviews and all. Orders, payment, shipment, demand generating, users, account and recombination, so notifications and all. So these all are the divisions of big application to the microservices. So how you will be do microservice should be autonomous and divided based on this business capability. So if you have business requirement, so you can do this one, defined by this driven design and single responsibility principle. Through that, greatly high cohesive software, and we can divide. So here's some guidelines while we have divided from this mono to micro. So, and after that, parallelly we can discuss and do the changes, and also you can see like what type of configurations, database and all is required based on the business. We can add this. So in the multiple microservice, we'll have a multiple database. In single microservice also we can use multiple database, not any issue. So most of the interview question also ask, can we use multiple database in a single microservice? Yes, in a single microservice also we can use multiple database or single database also. In multiple microservice we'll have a separate database also, or single database also, depends on the requirement we can do. How to stop Spring Boot based microservices as a startup? If can't, not connect, configure service during two step. So if you want, you can halt this service, not able to locate this config server during the bootstrap. You need to configure this following property in microservice. So we have a bootstrap.yaml file. There are three type of things is there: bootstrap YAML, manifest YAML and application.yaml. So if you are using bootstrap YAML, then application cloud config fail fast is true. Through that we can do this, stop this Spring Boot based on microservice startup. And then how to partitions the large application into the microservices. So we have already discussed, and these all are the way to participate partition of these microservices. How big a single microservice should be? So this is a big microservice, how big a single microservice would be. So like that can we in a single microservice will have a large dependent on the language of Java based on this. And how do microservice communicate each other? So microservice will communicate with a different way. Either this is a very common questions in every interview will ask how to communicate, or how do microservice communicate with each other. So there are multiple way. There is a synchronous way, asynchronous way. So synchronous way, REST HTTP, that will be communicated. Asynchronous way, we have a AMQP or JMS, Kafka and all. So depends on that we can communicate. So these all are the things. Then other side like ask what should be preferred communication style in microservice, synchronous or asynchronous. So preferable depends on the requirement, but preferable you must have asynchronous communications, that will be fine, because asynchronous communications either use RabbitMQ, Kafka, AMQP and all. So that will be better to communicate. And depends on if your microservice communicating still require for synchronous communication, then you can go for the still HTTP or REST template. What is the difference between orchestration and choreography microservice context? So we have a multiple microservice design is there, like orchestration, choreography. So Saga is pattern is there, CQRS and all is there. So this is the difference for orchestration and choreography. While you use transaction management by using Saga, so Saga we have like two ways. One is orchestration, other is choreography. So this is the examples which we have to follow. While depends on the requirement, we can go for this. So orchestration is recommended will be take a synchronous call, and choreography is used for the asynchronous communication. What frequent microservice will be released in production? So release in productions like deployment and release by using Amazon Git so how frequent? So there is no right answers, like depends on the customers requirements and all. We have to release to the production, because if based on the sprint task also maybe, or maybe some of the requirement features and all, so based on that we have to release into the production. Imply release frequently like this done. And what are the cloud native applications? So cloud native application like NCA is a style applications development encourage easy adoptions, the best practice in this area of continuous delivery and distributed software. So we have a microservice DevOps, the continuous delivery containers. Container we have a Docker, continuous delivery, CI/CD we have continuous integration and continuous delivery. DevOps will have infrastructures, microservices architecture style where we can develop the Spring Boot applications based on Spring frameworks. So how will you develop microservice using Java? So yeah, so how you will develop? So that type of questions also will ask. So what are the things you require? You need a Spring Boot, maybe a Spring Cloud, and a Spring framework which is required based on that, and then Java8 features. And after that you can create a Docker image, and then you have to also you can use a database, Kubernetes and all. What is API gateway? API gateway, why is required, when to use API gateway? So features of API gateway, Spring Cloud discovery, client integrations, rate limiting, path rewriting, and strict circuit breakers we can use for this API gateway. How to achieve zero downtime during deployment? So this is also very good questions, and API gateway also ask many where in company, but how to achieve zero down deployment during this deployment? So we have many type of asked by different interview questions. So blue green deployment is there. So change requirement by the code to handle this zero downtime. Change requirement this client to handle this zero downtime. So we have a blue green deployment, like we have a one instance will be there while you are doing for this deployment, then one instance will stop, another instance will work. like that. So if B is going for the deployment, then green will be like this, other instance will be up. So it will be handled by there. So you have to add, automatically you can switch from one to others. So that way, these all are the way where we can do, and how to achieve zero downtime deployment, like blue green deployment where there is a database changes and all. So backward compatibility change, non compatibility database change and all. How to maintain this ACID in microservice. ACID is a atomicity, consistency, isolability and durability. So isolation and durability. So these all are the use for the transactions while you use microservice communicate from one to other, and then there will be transactions need to be updated in the database. So this transactions we use for atomicity ACID operations while do. Yeah, so this type of so we have a commit, rollback and partial commits and all. So Saga also will come in this pictures while we communicating or do asynchronous communications, and the transactions we can show like commit, rollback and all will happen correctly. In that case better we can go for the Saga and all. So these all are the questions which I seen many of the interview questions I asked based on the Spring Boot. Previously we discussed for this Spring Boot. Currently these are the questions which are asked in microservices. Now some of the questions also will have a Java 8 features. So Java 8 features related questions will ask. Like suppose if you are using a Spring Boot microservices, then mostly you worked on this Java 8. So they will know about this, and they will ask some of the question like what are the features you added in Java 8 and what are the features you used in Java 8 related. So Java 8 related we know like lambda expression is there, method reference, optional, functional interface, default method, JavaScript and stream API and datetime API. So these all are the features are there. Depends on the requirement, we can go for this expressions, we can go for create a method reference, or maybe we use for the optional and all. So the first questions maybe ask what is method reference, when to use method reference, and then others like this is the like what do you mean meaning of a string reference value of expression. So it's a static method reference which a value of method is a string class. And when to use optional class, what is the use of optional, what is how we will use this. So we'll handle this null pointer exception by using optional class. So there are a way optional empty on not null like this. We can use this one. And functional interface, what is the use of functional interface, when to use functional interface. So functional interface will have a function, consumer, supplier, predicate, by functions, binary operator, unary operators and all. So four things will be asked, like what is the functional interface, when to use consumer, when to use supplier, when to use predicate, what is predicate. So predicate will have only one input as a boolean condition. Supplier will have a one not argument but return the result. Consumer will have a one argument and return no result. So function will take one argument and return result. So function will have a one argument, return result. Consumer will have a one argument, return no result. Supplier will have a no argument but return result. Predict will have a one argument and return boolean. So like that we have this type of some of the questions interviewer also ask why it is by function. So by function it take two argument and return result like that. So when to use, so depends on the requirement of business logic in service implementations or anywhere we can use the Java 8 features. So that functional interface we can use. What is functional interface, what are the rules of defining functional interface. So functional interface we have also many of the default functional interface are there, you know. So default method, what is default method, when to use default method, why we need a default method in Java. So this all are. And will the following code compile. So we have to check in this while we run this. So after that, Lambda expression is a common while you use Java 8, then you have to do lambda expressions, stream API and all. So lambda expression, what is the lambda expression, when to use lambda expression, and then explain the syntax characteristics of lambda expression. So optional type of declaration, optional parentheses, in this lambda expression, optional type of declaration, optional parenthesis, and then optional curly braces and optional return type. So these things is not required in lambda while you are getting any lambda expression. So these things will be removed or optional. If you want, you can use, else you can remove. So the code quality and all will be less easily we can develop, and the processing and all will be faster compared to other version and all. So JavaScript related necessary is there. So what is JSS? And a stream is a many common features while we use a stream. So what is a stream, or what does it different from the collection? So this type of questions must ask, like what is a stream and how does it differ from collection? So we have a collection framework is there in Java. So it will ask like why you use a stream instead of collection is there. So there are multiple features are there in the stream. So, and methods are there like filter, map, sum. Through that we can create, and inside that we have to use lambda expression. So what is the difference between intermediate and terminal operation is a very common interview questions asked in every interviewer. What is the difference between intermediate and terminal operation? So intermediate and terminal, so when to use this, so we can use in this Java 8, and so there are the scenario. And what is the difference between map and flat map? This is also a common interview which will be asked in every interviewer. Flat map and map. So this is the difference where we use map and flat map. And what is a stream pipeline in Java 8? So stream pipeline in Java 8. And after that, datetime API. So datetime API, while you use Java 8 features related datetime API, which will be taking all the DDMM Wi-Fi related things. So we have a multiple datetime declarations are there. So it's a util and util date package, and so there was a several issue with this existing datetime API library. So instead of that, Java 8 has introduced new datetime API in Java 8, so that you can go through like what are the changes and all. So these type of questions mostly asked in Java, Spring Boot, Microservices, and Java 8. So Java 8, just they will ask like simple interview questions like what are the definitions, when to use and all. Some of the programmatical questions also will ask, depends on the stream. So how you will create a stream, suppose to fetch this employee whose salary is 20,000, group by department is CS. You have to create this program related for a stream in Java 8 using lambda expressions and all. So that type of questions will ask. So uncommon which I seen these things ask for this Spring Boot, microservices, and Java 8. So Spring Boot, these all are microservices, these things, and Java 8. So these three is the combination of first 15 to 20 company where I have given this interview, and that I collected these type of questions they ask. Some of the company will ask just interview questions related for theoretical, depends on the interviewer. Some of the questions will ask some of the interview will ask theoretical, maybe some of the questions will ask theoretical with programming, some of will ask only concentrate about the programming first. So depends on that, I collected these all. Yeah, so the same, if you want this document, please ping me, comment in this channel, so that I'll provide this document so that you can take as a reference, and content you whatever is there you can follow to prepare your interview. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe my channel if you like it this video. Yeah, and also suggest what type of video if you want, so that we will create and upload the same. Yeah, thank you.